Okay, welcome back. So a story that broke, I'm going to choose our words very, very carefully here, was that the Australian ran a report that suggested that Jayne Hrdlicka, the CEO of Virgin Australia, didn't necessarily resign of her own accord, but was effectively pushed out. So, Jake, just tell us a little bit about the bare bones of this story, and then we'll analyse it.
Yes, so this came to us, as you say, via The Australian. They have cited a high-level source stating that Hrdlicka cried when she heard the news that she was being, forced. They're saying that she was forced out as CEO, that she cried when she heard the news, and she did not see it coming. Now, this was allegedly on the part of Bain Capital, the private equity firm that owns Virgin Australia. And so that would sort of contradict the public statements made by Virgin and by Jayne Hrdlicka that she was stepping down of her own accord, that she felt the time was right for a leadership transition, and that she wanted to, spend more time with her family and all the other reasons that CEOs usually give for leaving. So we cannot confirm this. But we were discussing earlier in the office, Adam, that nobody has exactly come out with a full-throated denial, have
exactly.
they?
So let's go through this again. This is not our story. So we to an extent this is speculation. But this is written by Robin Ironside, at The Australian, who's a very long-standing and a very accomplished journalist. She's obviously the best journalist behind us in the aviation patch. So she's essentially came out with this version, which is seems very different to the official version. And again, she cites these high-level sources. So let's assume firstly, which is an assumption here, but let's assume that story is correct. How could she have come past that story? Well, there's a number of options. It could have been a case that she had a high-level source who had seen the furor when she was told to leave. She saw Jayne crying, and this person has come to the Australian and said, this is what's happened. And she's probably either run the story on that or corroborated it with a second source that apparently saw these scenes. So that's one thing that could have happened. Another thing that could have happened is that this story was given to the Australian by either Jayne herself or perhaps somebody that was authorised almost to speak on her behalf. So in the kind of journalism parlance, this is what we would call being briefed. So this is when you're told something, but you're not allowed to reveal the source of it. Now, of course, the fact that we don't know exactly is kind of the cover, that nobody actually puts their name to it. But a lot of the times when a national newspaper gets a story, it will have been briefed. So the most obvious example is if you read a story that says Anthony Albanese will tomorrow say in his speech, that's because it's been given to the newspaper. So that is what could have happened. Those are the variety of possible options here. But as Jake said, if it was the case that this story was totally untrue, then presumably Jayne herself could have gone and released a statement. She could have gone on Twitter. She should have done it through the airline. And she could have said, the story in The Australian is 100% true. This was entirely my decision to go at this time and on this date. But of course, so far as we record this, that hasn't happened. We've just been redirected to the kind of a general statement we had previously.
Yes, no, I'm looking now at sort of the news feed on Google, and I'm still not seeing any denials, any like full-throated denials of this. There was one outlet that had anonymous sources saying that this was scurrilous rumors, that it was all nonsense, but if it was all scurrilous rumors and nonsense, why would there need to be anonymous sources saying it? Why doesn't Bain Capital or as you say, Jayne Hrdlicka come out and say, no, this is nonsense. I left voluntarily. I wish my successor all the best, etc., etc. I was not fired.
Yes. Now let's kind of delve into this. So let's just say we accept the version of events. That she didn't leave of her own accord, and she was effectively told to leave. And whether
assuming that we do accept that.
Assuming that we do accept that. So we've got to talk about whether that's fair, all right, yes or no. Now, you could look at this and you could say that Jayne actually did an outstanding job in incredibly difficult circumstances. Firstly, you could argue that just to be of a CEO of any airline during COVID, and she was the CEO for the majority of that, is an incredibly difficult thing. But you double that up with the fact that they came out of administration. So that's two incredibly difficult things she's had to deal with at the same time. She's had to take that airline, completely reboot its leadership team, totally change the structure of how it's worked. So it's gone from being an airline that was trying to challenge Qantas as a kind of full service airline now into being this kind of hybrid airline that on the same flight you can get budget fares and you can get a more full service experience. She's had to rebuild the fleet, which was kind of massively reduced when it came out to administration, and kind of build that back up again. And she's done all of this, and she's delivered a $100 and something million profit in her first full financial year. And that came off the back of about 10 years or 11 years of very big losses that saw the airline, I think it was up to sort of $7-8 billion worth of debt when they went to administration. So you would look at that and you'd look at her record in the circumstances and say, you have done a sensational job. The flip side argument of that was that while Virgin may have made $100 and something million in profit for the full financial year, Qantas made $2.5 billion. And the argument is that post-COVID time, when there was that pent-up demand for travel, was going to be the best time ever to run an airline. And your direct competitor is making, 20, 25 times as much as you. That is a huge failure. And you could also add to that there's so much ill feeling among the public towards Qantas, which Virgin has largely escaped. Given that apparently everybody hates Qantas, you should have been capitalising more on that. So that's the other side of the story.
Yeah, as Robin has said in her story, there's as you say, allegedly the feeling among Bain Capital that under Jayne Hrdlicka's tenure, Virgin had not adequately swooped on Qantas's mounting unpopularity. There is also it has been suggested that her capacity as chair of Tennis Australia, her role at the Australian Open, was seen by Bain allegedly as a distraction from her day job. And there have been Virgin's recent problems with on-time performance as well, because they have been lagging Qantas for quite some time in on-time performance, which we'll get to a little bit later. But there have been months when Virgin has been performing worse than Jetstar. So from those perspectives, you could see why perhaps Bain might have decided that now was the time to push Jayne Hrdlicka out. But until someone comes along and concretely confirms or denies what has happened, we can't really say anything for certain.
No, and again, I won't sort of dwell on that if that's the right word on it too much. But she's had a lot of difficulty in her personal life. She had her husband sadly die last year after having cancer for a number of years. That is something that would break almost anyone. That is an extraordinary thing to deal with. And imagine dealing with that at the same time of being an airline CEO, at the same time of being an airline CEO which has come out of administration, which has gone through COVID. I mean, that is an extraordinary set of things to do. And I think when you look at that and you look at her performance, I would say from the outside in, I think she's done a fabulous job, absolutely outstanding job. And to me, if it is the case that she's been kind of forced out, I think that is very harsh. And I understand that business is a harsh world. Maybe she's got a payout. But to me, looking at that, I would look and think, well, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 for your performance there. I mean, I think that to me feels like an extremely harsh decision, because I think she's done a very good job.
Well, it is a private equity firm, isn't it, Adam?
Well, yeah, this is it. The argument is that in this kind of brutal world of money, that's the only thing they care about. That this is not about personal feelings. But nonetheless, I think
Now, apparently, according to, again, Robin's story, they're looking to this Miami recruitment firm, Korn Ferry. Apparently, they're in talks with Virgin to find a replacement for Jayne. This may suggest that Bain is looking to recruit overseas.
A foreign hire.
A foreign hire, yeah. No, I think Greg's pretty happy at Air New Zealand. There's also speculation that Bain could go for a trade sale instead of an IPO. This high-level source in Robin's story says an IPO was never going to happen. The market conditions weren't right. Virgin's figures weren't close to good enough. Bain will be looking at other options such as a trade sale. Private equity firms don't usually hang around for too long.
Yes, well, I would say in Bain's defence, they've always said on the record they will be hanging around. They have said that if they were to list the company, they would still be a significant shareholder. They have kept faith in it, for 4 years now. So we'll see what happens. Perhaps by the time this podcast comes out, we'll have more concrete statements. But as we record this, that's all we know.
That is all we know.
That's all we know.
Knowing is half the battle. So we will probably need more if we're going to win the battle.